I assume that this music will not stop so we can continue dancing. Welcome, everyone. And this it is wonderful to have you all here, just in this beautiful afternoon, beautiful city, Istanbul, as well as all people joining us across the world. We also have an online audience. My name is Defne Arslan, Senior Director of the Atlantic Council Turkey Programs and AC in Turkey. It is my great pleasure to kick off this report launch to explore and discuss cooperation between Turkey and the West in the Black Sea. As we all know, Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022 upended the security environment in the Black Sea region, leading to the re-evaluation of long-held assumptions of European and NATO security. As we all know, Turkey and its Western NATO allies are broadly aligned on the most important principles for the region, including ensuring stability, deterring Russian aggression, and maintaining the territorial integrity of Ukraine while enhancing regional allies' Euro-Atlantic integration and connectivity. Nevertheless, Turkey's approach and response to the crisis has notable differences to that of most of its allies. Turkey has balanced its strategic relationship with Ukraine, including a deep military cooperation, while it also maintained its economic relationship with Russia. This project, proposed and led by our non-resident senior fellow, Yevgenia Gaber, is a timely and exciting addition to the Black Sea discussion and Turkey's role. Yevgenia, it was great to work with you on this important project, and thank you for this terrific work. Good job. I would like to thank our report contributors who are all here today, including our senior fellows, Rich Alson, covering the defense cooperation of the report, Eser Özdir, covering energy cooperation of the report, as well as Marina Vorotnyuk from RUSI, covering political dialogue, and Mr. Serhat Güvenç from Kadir Has University, covering the maritime security portion of the report. This project and report would not be possible without the support of German Institute for International and Security Affairs Center for Applied Turkey Studies. I'm very pleased to have the head of CATS, Dr. Hürcan Aslı Aksoy, with us today. It has been a pleasure to cooperate with you. Thank you. It is an honor to welcome Ambassador Basat Ozturk, Director General for International Security Affairs at the Turkish Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Ambassador Ozturk kindly came all the way from Ankara only for this meeting, so thank you very much, Ambassador. So it's an honor to have you here today. Ambassador Ozturk is a distinguished senior Turkish diplomat who previously served as the permanent representative to NATO and earlier as ambassador to Afghanistan. Ambassador Ozturk has also served in the Ministry of National Defense as Deputy Undersecretary. Ambassador, again, thank you so much for joining us today. I greatly look forward to your remarks on Turkey's perspective to the Black Sea and cooperation with the West. With that, I would like to welcome Ambassador Ozturk to the podium. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon to everybody. It's a pleasure for me to be with you and to be able to address this topic about the Black Sea. In fact, in your introduction, Defne Hanım, you mentioned that I was coming directly from Ankara, but before, just one day before, I was also flying from Seoul, where I had attended the responsible use of AI in the military domain summit. It's also relevant to our topic today because the title of the research project and also the title of the presentation or the conference seminar is about Turkey and the West. But as I was flying from Seoul, I think Seoul, South Korea is also part of the West. So also Japan, Australia, New Zealand, and many other countries are also belonging to the West. And I understand also that it may be difficult to name the relationship between Turkey and the European Union, Turkey and the United States and other allies. And therefore, it might have been difficult to find a proper topic. But without touching upon this topic, it's impossible to start my presentation, which is not prepared, which is not written on a text, which is, I know is risky, but it's going to be a genuine presentation. And I would like to share my thoughts on this basis. And as I was flying from Ankara just a few hours ago, we were flying over the Black Sea. And the Black Sea coast of Turkey, as you know, is the longest in the Black Sea. And relatively, I think it has been peaceful for a very long time. Even if there were wars, conflicts in the Black Sea region, but we were able to ensure and assure stability, safety, security, freedom of navigation, and also achieving prosperity with our maximum efforts through our bilateral efforts, unilateral efforts, but also mainly through regional organizations, including the Black Sea Economic Cooperation Organization, which may not have been as efficient as intended to be, but also there are, as you know, other regional initiatives we have launched, not alone, with also other littoral states of the Black Sea basin. In fact, this is not only a policy or a strategy, but it is a requirement by international law. And the international law, customary law of the sea, they all require regional littoral states to cooperate among each other, especially where there is a enclosed or semi-enclosed sea. And this is how also the alliance have come to the same understanding, and which was codified and reflected at the Vilnius summit in July 23. If you have read Article 79 of the Vilnius Communique, you would find that all allied heads of government and state agreed that the alliance would support allied regional efforts to uphold safety, security, stability, and safety of navigation, freedom of navigation in the Black Sea, including through the Montreux Convention of 1936. The Montreux Convention sometimes has been criticized by people who think is restrictive or is really strictly banning other countries to freely use the Black Sea. And we also hear concepts like free and open Black Sea, as if it is Indian Ocean or Pacific Ocean. This concept of free and open oceans, sea, is something we also support in principle, including throughout the Aegean Sea, for example, throughout the Eastern Mediterranean. And we have to be consistent that, of course, the oceans and seas of the world should be open for navigation, international navigation, for shipping, for trade, for the benefit of the whole humanity. We have no problem with that. But we have to also take into account the particular circumstances, specific circumstances, which make the Black Sea sui generis. It is really a sea of its own, unique to geography and also unique in terms of littoral states, their composition. And in this context, and we have to admit and remember the fact that the Black Sea has seen wars before, including the Second World War. The Montreux Convention survived the Second World War. There was also, as you know, a brief battle between Russia and Georgia in 2008. And the Montreux Convention and its regulations, which have been implemented since its inception for more than 8 decades have been implemented again in full to its spirit and letter. That is vital. And in this context, the Montreux Convention is part of also the customary law of the sea and international law. As you know, there are long-standing international conventions regulating the passage of ships through the straits. But the particular position of Black Sea in this context is different than, let's say, the Strait of Malacca or other international straits, because the Çanakkale and Istanbul Straits and the Sea of Marmara, this makes Turkish Straits as a whole is under full sovereignty of the Turkish Republic. So it's not an international strait. It's a Turkish strait or Turkish straits, but which is open to international shipping and navigation. And that's also not something free in full sense. It cannot be. You have just been here in Istanbul. The Strait of Istanbul is passing through the middle of a megapole, city like Istanbul. Millions of people live here. If an accident happens in the Istanbul Strait or Çanakkale Strait, which happened in the past, as you remember, in the Pendanta tanker, which burned here for days, weeks in fact. And then we had to close the strait for traffic, for all kinds of traffic, for 2 weeks. And the cost of such a closure would be huge. And that's why we have developed special regulations, again in accordance with international law, which have been registered also with the International Maritime Organization. These are traffic separation schemes, which also really enables safety of navigation throughout the straits. They are being monitored 24 hours, day and night, and the regulations and rules which have been designed, adopted, and registered with the IMO assures and ensures the safety of navigation also through the straits. By keeping them open to international shipping, commercial shipping, we are providing a vital lifeline to the littoral states of the Black Sea. But when it comes to passage of vessels of war, the Montreux Convention regulations are different. They are then treating the vessels of war in very specific way, and in this context, remember, when Russia started its so-called special military operation against Ukraine, which was in fact an occupation of Ukraine, just 3 days after that operation, we closed the straits to the vessels of warring parties. And this has to be understood very clearly, that we have never hesitated to implement the Montreux Convention under all circumstances in the most objective and efficient manner. So we are not taking sides here, and we are not really in any way we are blurring or undermining the very strategic and delicate balance the Montreux Convention has brought to the Black Sea region. And in this context also, we have to see that many ships belonging to the Russian Black Sea fleet could not come back, even if they had the right to return to naval bases, main naval bases, due to our efforts, diplomatic efforts, with also Russian Federation and with all the parties involved, they were kept outside the Black Sea. So in the Black Sea, the maritime battles, which we have seen initially, and then later on with the use of additional drones and other novel weapons, and it really changed the status quo in the sea, and in reality, the Russian Navy is confined and constrained to a narrow part of the Black Sea. So the war in between Ukraine and Russia is not taking place mainly in and over the Black Sea. It's taking on land. It's happening on land. And this war will be decided not only by land and air wars, but it's also going to be concluded with diplomatic efforts. That's why we have never hesitated to seek maximum benefits of diplomacy from day one of this war. And that's how the exchange of prisoners could have been possible. The Azov commanders, how could they be coming here? It was unthinkable, remember those days. And the exchange of prisoners also not only in the Azov case, but remember also 7 planes landed in Ankara in less than an hour and exchanged so many hostages and prisoners in so many countries. Many countries' citizens also, I am sure, are here listening to us or live listening to us again. And there are so many other examples, including the grain deal, Black Sea grain deal, which enabled also the safe passage of commercial ships carrying vital grain to the world markets. This would have been also possible, could have been possible with diplomatic efforts of Turkey. And later on, when the agreement could not be renewed, then there were practical arrangements to use the coastal waters of Romania and Bulgaria. And they were coming also again there. This is the gate of the Black Sea is Turkey. And therefore, we are not only the gatekeeper and guardian of the Black Sea, but we are also the guardian and gatekeeper of the strategic balance in the Black Sea. Yes, there is also the river Danube, but it's not comparable to Turkish Straits in any way. It is a river, it's important, it's also vital lifeline, but it's not comparable because the amount of cargo that can be carried through the straits, through seas, is hugely different than what can be carried by the barges over the rivers. And ultimately, I should also like to touch upon another risk and threat in the Black Sea, which was also a danger to commercial shipping. It's drifting mines. Both sides have planted mines in the Black Sea. Understandable, it's a war situation. But some of them had been released or had released themselves and drifted towards where? To the south. Because the Black Sea is 5 centimeters higher than the Sea of Marmara and the Aegean Sea. So this direction of flows, currents from the north and south, inevitable. What we did against this threat and risk, which is maybe the only real threat in the Black Sea, we established a mine countermeasure Black Sea task group between Romania, Turkey, and Bulgaria, which was also in line with paragraph 79 of Vilnius Summit Communique, exactly this alliance guidance how to act in the Black Sea region. And also we activated this task group 1st of July this summer, just 1 week, 8 days before the Washington Summit. And the Washington Summit has reaffirmed and reconfirmed the guidance agreed by all allied heads of state and government in Vilnius once again. In short, we also support Ukraine, not without any hesitation, because Ukraine is our neighbor, historically a brotherly, sisterly country, and you know that we have here also Crimean Tatars, about 3 million maybe of Crimean Tatar origin Turks living in Turkey, alone here in Turkey. But it's not only about Crimean Tatars. We consider the whole Ukrainian people also our sisters and brothers. And that's why I really care about them wholeheartedly. So we don't want to prolong this war. We would like, of course, this doesn't mean that Ukraine must surrender. It should really be concluded in a peaceful manner without further casualties, because war is disastrous for any party involved. It's destroying land, it's destroying agricultural lands, it's destroying industrial infrastructure, it's destroying people's lives. It's a really very hard feeling, and we are so sad to see this suffering. And we should really all together work harder to make a peaceful conclusion of this war situation. It's going to be happening anyway. No war has continued forever. And the terms of the conclusion, peace of this war should also be, of course, respecting the legitimate and legal interests of Ukrainian people, but also we have to understand that we need to have a balanced outcome of these peace talks. So with this, we are not only talking about peace, we are not only promoting diplomatic political outcomes and solutions to the conflict, we are also prepared for any contingency as being the second most powerful ally. I am claiming to be as being the second most powerful ally, and maybe here also challenging other allies who also claim to be big major allies in NATO. But you know the difference between Turkey and those other major allies within NATO is that we have never benefited the so-called peace dividend. Even after the end of the Cold War, when many allies in Europe were discarding, in fact, finishing their inventories with tanks, with heavy artillery, heavy weapons, and even decreasing their armies to the minimum level, hoping that the time of wars ended, failed. And now they are trying to replenish. And what happened? We saw in 9/11 a big surprise, this terrorist attack in New York, horrible, changed the course of history. We went to Afghanistan all together for 20 years. And then, remember, had abandoned Afghanistan in August 21 in a hasty and hectic way, which in fact have left a trace and also a psychological effect, and also changed the calculation of many maybe big and small powers. Equally, the war in Syria. Equally, the occupation of Iraq. And other mistakes made have really put us in a very difficult position. And when we talk about here, then the West and Turkey, sea of opportunities. There are sea of oceans of opportunities, but it cannot be only on the Black Sea. It cannot be only in the context of war in Ukraine. It cannot be only in the context of security and defense. If we are an ally, a partner, and we also belong to the West, but we have more than what other our Western allies and partners have, because we are also here at the meeting point of the West and East, North and South. The Istanbul airport, at an average every day, 1,300 flights come and go. 90 million passengers use this Istanbul airport. It's the busiest airport in Europe. It's not a coincidence, since the pandemic. Also, somebody talking about Black Sea being a bridge. The bridge, if there is any in the bridges you have seen with your own eyes, are here. So we are the bridge, natural bridge. So therefore, it's impossible to do any kind of meaningful project in the Black Sea by excluding Turkey, either laying a cable or doing trade, or you name it, anything is not possible. But I'm not exaggerating also the position of Turkey, because it's not also possible without Ukraine. It's not also possible without Romania and Bulgaria. It's not also even possible without the Russian Federation, hopefully, when there will be a peaceful settlement of this war. And if we can achieve this peaceful conclusion, settlement, then we will again live in peace, stability, and we will all have prosperity. And the Black Sea is only the one sea of so many seas and oceans our alliance is bordering. There are other challenges in the Arctic Ocean, huge, Pacific Ocean, Indian Ocean, Atlantic Ocean. So therefore, just look at how many ships the allies have, and how many of allies have the capacity to build ships. At what pace? You will find out that also here Turkey is really a star in shipbuilding, and is going to be the case for future as well. But there are also other adversaries and rivals who can have capacities, who can mobilize capacities. In this way, I don't want to name countries, but they can really build ships 2, 3, 10 times more than what are even the biggest major allies can even think of. I don't want to prolong my presentation, but I hope I have given you a realistic and genuine view of the situation. In the context of the alliance, and finally I should like to say that Turkey is a committed NATO ally. So we are fulfilling all our responsibilities in full. But we expect also other allies to act like allies and also to treat us like a major ally, because whether they like it or not, we are a major ally. Just by being Turkey is enough to be respected with its population, with its geography, its geopolitical position, with its policies, and with its genuine efforts to remain as a committed ally, but also equally to remain as a good neighbor, good friend, reliable for all the countries of the Black Sea. So these are the opportunities, but we are open for any kind of discussion, dialogue. The European really should take the steps to name themselves, saying that we are, the EU, would like to have sea of opportunities with Turkey, most welcome. Individual countries, most welcome. United States, Canada, all others are welcome. We are open for talks, dialogue, and explore the opportunities together. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Ozturk, for your insightful remarks and for setting the stage for our discussions. My name is Yevgenia Gabor. I'm a non-resident senior fellow with the Atlantic Council in Turkey and also a lead for this project. And thank you, Daphne, for your kind introduction. It's really an honor to share this room with you. Thank you for coming. And what we're going to do today is give you just an appetizer, kind of a short presentation of the report that we launched just today in the morning. This is a very new read by the Atlantic Council and the team, the CATS and the Atlantic Council's project outcome. And just in the morning today, I remember that when I was here in Turkey, with my diplomatic tenure, I served in Ankara as a Ukrainian diplomat. We had this joke that 24 hours is a very long term for such a dynamic region at the Black Sea. So if you prepare some policy recommendations or some policy analysis in the evening, be sure that you send it to your capital this evening, because in the morning, it's not necessarily the fact that those policy recommendations will still sustain their relevance. And with this being said, I need to mention that we started our project exactly 1 year ago, in August 2023, but the policy recommendation that you will read online, and I invite you also to visit the web page of our project to read the full report. You will have 4 different chapters there. They are still relevant because this is a work and outcome of a 1-year-long interviews with subject matter experts, desktop research, and also academic and professional practical background of our contributors, whom I'm going to introduce in a couple of minutes. And I think the bottom line here is that with the Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2022, we don't have the Black Sea regional security architecture as we used to have before. It first collapsed in 2008 with the Russian invasion of Georgia. The next step was occupation of Crimea and Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2014. And the 2022 was perhaps the last moment when it was clear for all littoral states and also for global actors that the European security and even the transatlantic security, as we are used to thinking of, is no more the case, because now this is a major war, conflict in the center of Europe, which of course has impacts for Turkey, for Bulgaria, Romania, let alone Ukraine, and for the European security generally. And if there is a blessing in disguise, if there is a silver lining in the mass atrocities which the Russian occupying forces are committing in Ukraine, is perhaps that now the threat perception in the region has changed. And it's pretty obvious that this war is a threat for the national security of Turkey, for the national security of Bulgaria, Romania, Germany, the United States, and everyone, because this is not Russian war against Ukraine only. I would say this is also Russian attack on the European security and the rules-based world order. So here in the Black Sea region, it's basically a shared and common interest to deter Russia, to bring peace and stability and security to the region. And this is exactly how, with the help of its partners, European partners, Turkey, other partners, as Ambassador mentioned, of the political West, Japan, South Korea, not only the European Union per se, this stability can be brought back. And this is exactly why we decided to have this project supported by SWP CATS, that we can think of those areas of cooperation and those specific projects where Ukraine, Turkey, littoral states, European partners, and the US can work together, because apparently there are so many converging, overlapping interests that we can use this moment to bring a more fair and hopefully stable post-war Black Sea security architecture. I think the first step, it's obvious that the sustainable and just peace is a must, but then afterwards we have to think of the post-war security architecture, which would be inclusive but also fair and sustainable. And with this, these are all not easy questions, but I'm honored and happy to be joined by a stellar panel of experts who are going to explain us and share their results of their one-year-long research with us today. Let me introduce, starting from my left, direct left, with Dr. Serhat Güvenç, who is currently Professor of International Relations and the Dean of the College of Economics Administrative Sciences at Kadir Has University, and previously held many academic and faculty positions, both in Turkey and abroad. And Dr. Serhat Güvenç's research interests include Turkish foreign relations, modern Turkish military and naval history, and we were happy to have Dr. Güvenç covering the maritime security aspect in our project. So thank you for joining us in this project. The liberal center, I would say, of the panel, Dr. Marina Varetnyuk, an associate fellow at RUSI, Royal United Services Institute for Defense and Security Studies, Ukrainian foreign policy analyst covering Black Sea region, Russia, Ukraine, Turkey, and Marina was writing on political dialogue and diplomatic openings where Turkey can play a leading role, and also how European partner, the US and Turkey, can work closer together in diplomatic and political realm. Dr. Rich Uzan is a geopolitical analyst and consultant and non-resident senior fellow at the Atlantic Council Turkey programs, and also co-editor of the Atlantic Council's Defense Journal and the Colonel. So this is a serious guy covering the most hard security issues with the defense cooperation, with military technical cooperation, but also talking of Turkey's role in the Black Sea region in more general terms. And last but not least, we have Mr. Eser Özdil, an energy expert, a key energy expert, a non-resident fellow at the Atlantic Council, who has worked in his long career both with the European institutions and with Turkish governmental agencies, and working a lot on projects of partnerships in energy sphere, gas hub projects, and what can be done to diversify energy resources and strengthen Turkey's energy security. Thank you for being part of this project, and just to jump directly into discussion, I would probably ask Marina, you, because your chapter is also the first and the overarching chapter of our report, to share your findings, your main takeaways, and also perhaps in this first round of short remarks to focus on those areas and those avenues of cooperation that you've found during your research, and tell us where we can do more to strengthen this cooperation.
Thank you very much, Evgenia. Thanks a lot. I would like to start by extending my thanks to the Atlantic Council in Turkey and to Katz, Center of Applied Turkey Studies, for bringing me on board for this project. This is an extremely interesting intellectual exercise because typically talking on Turkey and the West relations, we are naturally focusing a lot on turbulence or problematic issues, which is natural. We are trying to identify what are kind of, or diagnose, what kind of problems we have, how to tackle them. And here in this project, what we try to do is actually to go even deeper, to try to identify what are the shared interests, what are the commonalities, not just to diagnose the divergences in attitudes or perceptions or approaches, but to actually find out, okay, what are the interests and what are the common interests which can be actually hidden a bit under the facade of divergent policy approaches. But then, if you look deeper, we actually find out that the interests of the parties are not as divergent as often perceived, that even with all this mutual distrust or estrangement that has defined Turkey-West relations in recent years, even though policies are not sufficiently aligned, so as the security perceptions, the actual interests are more closely aligned than sometimes publicly acknowledged. So this is, if you will, is the main departure point, and my main conclusion of this project is that we have those very solid commonalities. So I was responsible for political and diplomatic part, and let me say that there are pillars where Turkish and Western, again, a footnote. Do we talk about the West as some sort of uniform West or some sort of uniform Western policies to the Black Sea or actually elsewhere? No, of course, we understand that, but for the purpose of this project, let me say, we talk about a different range of actors, but let me try again to find the common denominator what are the common pillars of interest in the Black Sea? So let me start by saying that Turkey and the West in the Black Sea, we talk about the Black Sea, and again, another footnote probably is that Black Sea, we understand, is not isolated from a broader context, right? So Turkey is very famous for being able to compartmentalize its relations. I mean, when we talk about Turkey-Russia relations, I think the first term that we use is the compartmentalized partnership, right? That Turkey can leave aside certain, let's say conflicts, direct or more hidden conflicts, and cooperate with Russia on the areas or geographies where it sees there is a field for maneuver. So let me say that in this case, talking about the Black Sea has not been isolated from Turkey's problematic relationship with the West or with some actors in the Eastern Mediterranean, for instance, from the problematic relationship between the US and Turkey, or again, troubled relationship with the European Union. So this all is a footnote, something we need to keep in mind. So if you will, I just name some of the principles that are common for both Turkey and the West. So first, we have heard already the remarks about the regional order in the Black Sea. And I would say that the first common interest for Turkey and the West is to try to restore the regional security order in the Black Sea. Yes, again, an important observation is that it has been a fragmented security order for years, because before 2008, Russia's attack against Georgia, the region was not completely immune or free from conflicts. We've had frozen conflicts in the Black Sea. So, but what I'm talking about is what happened 2 years ago, more than 2 years ago, is actually that the region became a battlefield, an actual battlefield for, it hasn't witnessed such a large-scale war in the modern times. So, and of course, I would argue that restoring the regional security order here in the region, free from Russian coercion and aggression, is in Turkey's interest, is in the interest of the West. This includes restoring Ukraine's, Moldova's, Georgia's territorial integrity, securing their democratic anchoring, that they succeed in their integration aspirations, joining EU in case of all three countries, or NATO in case of Ukraine and Georgia, who aspire to join NATO. So this is a mutual interest. strengthening NATO's posture in the Black Sea. I mean, many Turkey experts would note that Turkey's position in the Black Sea on the engagement of non-littoral states' presence, read the US, has always been, let's say, very specific, right? That the region should be left to the regional powers, and there should be no major intervention of other powers which that reportedly can destabilize the region. But still, I would say, even though, as of recently, we have heard some assessments of Turkey being a strategic obstacle, obstructionist power, or unreliable ally. So alongside all these labels, what remains the fact is that Turkey contributed to the enhanced NATO posture since 2014. So it complied with all the measures and decisions of the alliance, aimed to boost alliance posture in the Black Sea. It contributes a lot. It contributes to all the defense efforts here in the Black Sea, but elsewhere too. We concentrate on the Black Sea. Contributes forces to the air policing mission in Romania, to the NATO battle group in Bulgaria. So So I call this a common interest too. Turkey benefits from stronger NATO benefits from stronger Turkey in the Black Sea. Next, strengthening Turkey's regional leadership is a common interest, I believe. Turkey has a historical embeddedness in the region, which is cannot comparable to any other power here. So Turkey enjoys and exercises such a, let's say, such a clout in the region that is not comparable to any other power here. Its position in the South Caucasus, its unique rapport with Azerbaijan, its, again, contribution to the Ukrainian defense efforts. And I think it's in the Western interest to try to leverage Turkey's potential in stabilizing the region, promoting stability in the South Caucasus through connectivity projects. If we see if Turkey-Armenia normalization finally, has some distinct shape, this will very much improve the stability in South Caucasus, but also Black Sea as a region. This will make the sub-region of South Caucasus more Russia-proof, because with normalization with Armenia, we understand, and Turkey, between those two actors, we understand that Armenia, basically, which is already very much disappointed in the inflation of Russian security guarantees, with Russia distracted by the war in Ukraine, that we have a chance actually to have a better security situation in the region.
Thank you. Let me just interrupt you here, because sure, we will have another round of comments, and with what you mentioned, that makes a perfect bridge to Dr. Güvenç's chapter about maritime security, because demining mission has been mentioned several times. Ambassador also mentioned shipbuilding capacity, which I think is also fitting very well into what Turkey is doing to help Ukraine, and also supporting Ukraine in degrading naval capabilities of Russia. So let me give the floor to you, but maybe just, as an appetizer, ask this question of, do you think that generally the perception of Russia's naval power has changed since the start of the full-scale invasion, and after Ukraine has degraded Russian capabilities, basically having destructed 1/3 of the Russian fleet, or is Russia still seen as a major threat or a dominant power in the naval sphere, and what can be done to counter Russia there and to enhance cooperation between Turkey and European partners in the maritime domain?
Wow, that's a big question. Thank you, Yevgenia. I would like to thank Yevgenia for having me on board this project, and I'm hoping that she will excuse me for having missed many deadlines, extended deadlines, because I am also working on a parallel project, and which has taken more time than this. Just to say, if you already, the Ambassador Basat Ozturk already outlined Turkey's view of maritime security and Turkey's priorities there. Just to add what he said regarding his trip back from Seoul, I was having dinner. I had dinner with a Japanese diplomat last night in a sushi restaurant, and we discussed, he was in charge of Ukrainian economic reconstruction, etc. And the discussion came down to whether Japan considers itself a Western power, and how how Japan views Turkey within the Western security community, etc., he didn't have immediate answers. But in the broader definition of the term, we have to take into account countries like South Korea and Japan as stakeholders in the Black Sea because they're part of the Western security system. And Yevgeny very brilliantly laid it out indeed. I mean, life is what happens while you're busy making other plans. Normally, my part of the report opens with a sentence on the activation of this Black Sea Mine Countermeasures Task Group, MCM Black Sea in short. But last night, a Panama flag ship operated by a Turkish company was hit by a Russian cruise missile launched from a Tupolev 22M strategic bomber aircraft. If this incident had taken place earlier, I would have revised my paper, but now that we don't have that chance, I mean, I would like to say a few things about that because this incident may have significant ramifications, implications for the security situation in the Black Sea. Yes, in the maritime domain, Turkey has a very strong leverage in the form of Montreux Convention to kind of tune up, tune down the level of tension, and others. It can influence others' ability to shift their naval forces in the Black Sea. But in the air domain, it's a totally different story. Turkey has no functional equivalent of the Montreux Convention in the air. And Turkey has been an active contributor to NATO's air policing mission with fighter aircraft, with AWACS aircraft, with maritime patrol aircraft, and to my knowledge, I mean, with several uncrewed aerial vehicles, etc. But this may be a turning point in the war and in the maritime security situation. Because the risk of escalation, which Turkey has tried to keep at a minimum, is now in the air domain. How can we tackle this threat? Is this the beginning of a pattern? Is this a beginning of a pattern on the part of Russians to test, the limits of NATO? The incident took place in the international waters within the Romanian exclusive economic zone. If it had taken place in the Romanian territorial waters, it would have been a totally different story. If the ship was a Romanian ship, a Turkish ship, it would have been a totally different story. So we have plenty of excuses not to make such a big deal out of that. But we may be on the eve of a new wave of escalation in the Black Sea. And all these, indeed, may render Turkey's efforts to maintain some level of stability in the Black Sea, unfortunately, obsolete, I would say, or irrelevant. Because an escalation in the air may result in the expansion of war and may even escalate to the level of an open confrontation with NATO and Russia. But we have to see whether there is going to be a pattern or not. If this is one of an event, then okay. I mean, it may go on as business as usual. We can talk about Maritime Countermeasures Task Group until the next Russian attack. What is interesting, I think it was August last year, not this August, but Russian commandos, right, boarded again Turkish-operated vessel in the Black Sea. And this is the first time they're targeting, whether deliberately or not so, Turkish interests in the Black Sea. I don't know if there is a messaging involved or not, or it's just pure coincidence. Therefore, that shows the limits of Turkey's ability to affect the maritime security situation in the Black Sea. My conclusion or my understanding of Black Sea security is that it doesn't take place in a vacuum. It's an extension of the security and stability situation at the global level. One reason the Black Sea security architecture Turkey advocated, championed, survived after the Russian-Georgian war was that because Obama was interested in a reset with Russia. Therefore, the international context was conducive for resuming or maintaining the Black Sea regional order. And that regional order could survive, maritime security order could survive until 2014. I'm an independent academic, so I have the luxury of thinking differently from an official. What official Turkish position carefully avoids to state is that Russia is a revisionist power in the Black Sea. And it is very difficult, if not impossible, to build regional orders with revisionist powers. You need status quo powers. You need sufficient number of status quo powers, but if the revisionist power is the largest one in the Black Sea, it is almost a mission impossible. So you can contain that country, try to contain that country, you can engage with that country, but at the end of the day, you have to deal with the revisionist power. And Russia, is not trying to hide its revisionist ambitions. I mean, we have to accept that. The problem now, we don't have a general global context, and there is no effort to bring Russia into the fold of liberal international order, to the rules-based international order, or whatever is left of it. And therefore, without a suitable international context, it is a difficult job. One of the takeaways from my research on the topic is lack of knowledge on the part of Western observers, researchers, academics, admirals, former generals, etc., former commanders, lack of knowledge of the Montreux Convention. And the presumption that the United Nations law of the sea should prevail over the Montreux Convention, although the Montreux Convention is not, mentioned specifically, but there is a provision in the law of the Sea Convention that excludes the application of some principles of international law of the sea in historical straits, including the Turkish straits. So we have a huge cognitive bridge to close in between Turkey and its Western allies. Once that cognitive bridge is closed, then we will have a better understanding of the security. Final word, the EU and Turkey are strategic competitors in the Black Sea, as things stand. And therefore, without redefining Turkey's relations with the EU, it will be very difficult to have these two important actors to have complementing policy strategies to improve maritime security situation in the Black Sea. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, and interesting remarks that you made regarding what Russia is trying to achieve with occasional attacks and assaults on the Turkish-operated vessels, and generally testing the waters, because it's not only about Turkey, right, but also about Latvia and Sweden and Romania and Poland. If these just occasional missiles and drones which end up in the territories of the NATO members, or is it a political messaging? And some experts, I think, even mentioned that this may be somehow related to the President Erdogan's remarks on Crimea is Ukraine during the Crimea platform. But it's interesting because I think in the Eastern Europe, the perception is that this is exactly the policy of Russia, trying to push and to see whether there is a pushback or not, and then maybe to push more. So it's interesting to discuss how it's seen in Turkey, and I also invite all of our guests here to contribute to this discussion when we have Q&A. But my follow-up question to you, you mentioned air policing, and you mentioned that this attack can be potentially maybe a turning point. Do you think there may be a discussion about expanding the mandate of the demining initiative also to make it a kind of more stabilizing force in the Black Sea region, probably up to air policing over the western or northwestern Black Sea, or is it now very much focused only on clearing the sea from the mines?
It has a specific mandate, and its mission is, how should I put it, very clearly defined. Therefore, I mean, that cannot go beyond the original scope. It's not designed like that. But air policing is a different issue. I mean, as far as I know, the mandate for NATO's air policing mission covers the territories of member states plus their territorial waters, not beyond that. So it will be very difficult to build consensus to extend the mandate of this air policing mission beyond the territorial waters of the literal NATO members. But if such a decision is taken, and I think the chances are very slim for that because Turkey will object to such an extension. But for the sake of argument, let's assume that Turkey gave its blessing to that, then this would increase the chances of confrontation, standoffs, even, I mean, incidents involving loss of combat aircraft, and which may give excuse to the party which enjoys the escalation domination advantage, which is Russia, to take the conflict to a higher level.
And I think, thank you for that answer. And I think because Rich was just nodding his head and also taking some notes, that is exactly the time when I'd like to pass the floor to you and ask for your comments. If you want to react to something that has been said before, please, and share your findings with us.
Great, sure. No, I was raising an eyebrow at escalation dominance only because it's really a matter of who's willing to apply that, right? I mean, I would, as a patriotic American, assert that we actually have escalation advantages over Russia should we choose to use them. But the whole question, as we see with the debate over whether we allow Ukraine to use long-range weapons to strike at the people that have been striking them from Russian territory, shows we're not willing to use our escalation dominance. So it's a tricky question. By the way, just a thought occurred to me this a couple months ago, but there was some detritus from a missile that was fired towards the western part of Ukraine that fell into Romanian territory a couple months back. There was an aircraft that was dispatched, an F-16, to go check it out and conduct the initial analysis. It was a Turkish F-16. So the Turkish contributions to NATO include the fact that they've done some defensive patrolling of NATO territory in Russia. That might be something that could be looked at in terms of expanding, if it's only restricted to the territorial airspace, where they could do more in that regard, and I don't think Turkey would be opposed to that. I can't speak for the Turkish government. But by the way, on a nostalgic note, I was a U.S. liaison officer working with the Turkish brigade in eastern Afghanistan, and I arrived the same month that Ambassador Ozturk arrived to be the Turkish ambassador to Afghanistan, and I had the pleasure of spending 2 years in that mission. Going back a little bit further, I was, as a very young officer, serving in Turkey, and I was engaged in the deterrence of the Soviet Union in the Caucasus and Black Sea region. I had 14 months in one of the loveliest towns in Turkey, Erzurum. I'm expecting some groans from the crowd here. Why do I tell you this? I tell you this because I've seen two things based on those experiences. First of all, I've seen a period of successful, sustained deterrence. It wasn't exactly Russians, it was Soviets, but it was sort of the same geopolitical actor. And I've seen Turkey's role in that. And I know that that sort of deterrence can only be done when we have Turkey and the United States working in a very close, coordinated manner. And the second thing is, based on my time in Afghanistan, I've also seen the variability of U.S. interest in what we would consider marginal regions. Central Asia is a marginal region. Western Europe is not. But in places like Africa, Central Asia, and I hate to say it, the Black Sea, the United States greatly varies in its interest over time. It took an act of Congress, literally, to produce, and it's still being formed, a United States strategy for the Black Sea. I'll make a comment later about our method for putting that strategy together, which I was not a huge fan of. But what does this mean? This means that for friends of Turkey and for Americans who are concerned about how we exercise statecraft, I know there's at least one here, that you have to count on that variability. We cannot make plans for conflict termination or for the conduct of this conflict on the basis of a sustained level of commitment from the United States that we have now. I'm not saying that because I don't want us to. Another small disclosure, my wife is ethnically a Crimean Tatar. I, like President Erdogan, think that Crimea is Ukraine, and I would like to see it back that way. However, we have to be realistic about how hard it is to force large countries with nuclear weapons to do things that they don't want to do. And the United States' record of successfully setting war aims and executing wars in order to achieve those aims, well, let's just say over the last 30 to 35 years, has not been uniformly successful. There have been exceptions. So let's begin with just that general context as an observation. So let's assume that there will be an asymmetry between the United States and Turkey. Turkey is going to be way more interested in the Black Sea, and including Ukraine and the conclusion of this war, than the United States is. Again, right now it's a very prominent issue in the United States, and I still, in my neighborhood in Northern Virginia, there's many houses that have a Ukrainian flag alongside the American flag. We care right now, but we may not care in 5 years, and we may not care in 10 years. What you'll find in my chapter is a discussion about a realistic approach to that. All of us would like to see the unsuccessful conclusion of Russia's offensive war against Ukraine. I think everybody in this room, unless we have some Russian diplomats, probably feels that way. I met one the other day.
Here in the neighborhood.
So not all of us, but some of us want to see this war end with the overthrow of the Putin government, right? But what can we do as a matter of common interest and what we can all actually agree on? This is something where the United States and Turkey disagree a little bit, or at least we vary in our approach. Because on the one hand, Turkey, which again the United States has to consider as a primary ally working in this area and somebody with a veto to exercise over any bad ideas that come out of Brussels or out of Washington if they are not prior coordinated. So the Turkish approach is that the worst thing that could happen, as I understand it, the worst thing that could happen in this war would be a Ukrainian loss. And that the second worst thing that could happen would be a catastrophic Russian loss. Why? Because it could, by the way, lead to something worse than Putin in Moscow. There are people who think that would happen. And second of all, it could lead to chaos or to further reckless and irresponsible behavior by a nuclear armed country. That's not a good thing. Turkey, in the way that I describe it in the book, has exercised sort of a triangular balancing approach to the Black Sea. And by that I mean, on the one hand, it works with NATO, but only the littoral NATO states. And if Americans like myself were to ask our friends in Ankara, why don't you want the United States all over the Black Sea? Or France, or something like that. We just need to look to the other side of Turkish borders, to Syria and Iraq, and see that when the United States, France, and some other allies in the NATO context are involved on Turkish borders on security matters, we don't always do that in a manner that is consistent with Turkish interests or with Turkish sensitivities. So I kind of understand why Ankara does not want to see, say, the Sixth Fleet with a carrier group, off the coast of Romania, Bulgaria, or Turkey. So this triangular balancing means NATO, yes, but only the littoral states. It means also strong support to the non-NATO allies of Turkey in the region, which I would include Ukraine and Azerbaijan. But also the third leg is Russia, because it's not an ally of Russia, but it has pragmatic economic and diplomatic ties to Russia. And as to echo what Ambassador Ozturk said earlier, this war is probably not going to end with the collapse of Russia or with its catastrophic military defeat. If you're familiar with Russian history, the Second World War, even the war against the Finns, right, and was it 39 and 40 it started, they're willing to incur massive losses and still persist. Now, there are times when Russia will walk away from a war, like they did in Afghanistan, and frankly, at the end of the Cold War. What happens is you have to have a sustained deterrent collective mechanism. You have to be willing to inflict enough pain so that at a certain point they say, okay, I'm going to stop. And they will stop. That's my theory of victory and how this works. The problem in Washington is that many people don't actually have a theory of victory. They don't have a theory of how this ends with Ukraine more or less intact. What they do is they have a fervent, pious hope that Russia will totally lose. But again, the chances of us saying, press on to total victory and then getting tired of it after about 5 or 10 years, only you have to look back to the fall of Kabul to understand that that is a likelihood or at least a possibility. So I personally am closer to the Turkish view of saying, let's make this painful enough for the Russians that they quit of their own volition rather than counting on their ultimate collapse. Now, what is Turkey doing in order to make this happen? I will say that Turkey should be proud of its record of military support to Ukraine at a time when Berlin and Washington and others were saying, should we give them helmets or should we give them guns? This whole question about, do we provide lethal aid? Turkey was very quietly not only providing Bayraktar drones, but also Kirpi armored vehicles, ammunition. They've been building naval vessels that are not necessarily that relevant to the current fighting. But I also know that there were training teams and commando exchanges, and really going back to very shortly after, and maybe even before the first invasion of Ukraine in 2014, the Turks understood early on they need to help the Ukrainian military. Now, there's a lot more support now coming from the West, especially the United States, Poland, and some other countries as well, but Turkey still sustained a lot of that. One of the most interesting things is that Turkey has become a major supplier of artillery ammunition. This war has, in its current phase, become largely an artillery battle. The United States, and this goes back to the peace dividend, I hate to keep echoing you, Ambassador, I'm sorry, but you're a brilliant man. So Turkey, unlike many of the other NATO allies, did not divest from its artillery ammunition production capabilities. And as a result, now that the Russians are producing something like 1 million shells a month, and the United States capability is somewhere in the territory, I think, of 1/10 of that, Turkey has partnered in the form of a firm called Repcon with General Dynamics, an American firm in Texas, to produce 155 millimeter ammunition. That will, I think, by 2025 represent something like 1/3 of all US production. This is a great paradigm and a great example where Turkish capability with some US funding comes together, and a lot of those shells are going to go to Ukraine, right? There are a wide range of military systems and supplies in which that kind of defense industrial cooperation can benefit the United States, can benefit Turkey, and can also benefit allies including Ukraine that have a specific need for these things. I'd like to see more of that. Now, it's also the case that the fact that EU and Turkey in the Black Sea and some other places are actually strategic rivals, as Serhat Bey was saying, Serhat Hoca, is a problem. When the Europeans voted on, I think it was 5 billion euros to be spent on weaponry to support Ukraine, they made a provision that it has to be only from EU countries. Well, that rules out Turkey, right, pretty obviously. So what you're saying right there is that's 5 billion euros, of which not a cent will go to somebody who's ready to produce things to the high standard that the Ukrainians need, and the Ukrainians are pretty familiar with and like the Turkish material. That's an impossibility with that current policy. So that's one thing that has to be undone, is this tripping up of defense industrial cooperation by the European Union. So, I won't get too much. We can get into the details of the.
And maybe that's a good place.
point.
To just stop there for a bridge to the fourth presentation. But before I do that, I just wanted to ask you, because you mentioned that the only way basically to deal with the irresponsible behavior of a nuclear state is either to somehow accommodate it, or not to maybe openly confront it, or also to deter and contain it. And a lot depends on the level of commitment which each of the stakeholders has in this. Do you see this as another potential area of cooperation between Turkey and the US or the European countries, if not directly to go into open war with Russia, obviously, but then to step up this defense cooperation, as you mentioned, in production, to increase the capabilities of Romania, Bulgaria, Ukraine, other partners, NATO, non-NATO allies in the Black Sea, to actually build this axis of the countries that respect international law to counterweight Russian influence and to deter possible future Russian aggression in the Black Sea?
I do. I think that the example of what happened with Turkish assistance to Azerbaijan is a useful one here. I think it's doing something similar with Ukraine. It should step that up, but also with Romania and Bulgaria. I think joint exercises, increased logistical support, all of those things within the NATO, and in the case of Ukraine, sort of side by side with the NATO commitments, can and should be done. The problem is that the United States still has a very problematic relationship with Turkey and bilateral. We don't have the level of defense collaboration at the strategic and policy level that we used to. The military still get along in terms of exercise and things like that. But the United States still has not come to grips with the fact that Turkey is the lead NATO power in this region. And just a quick comment, I talked about the strategy. The United States strategy for the Black Sea mentions Turkey, I think, twice or 3 times, the one that was issued as a report to Congress. And in pretty much every mention, it basically said, oh, and convince the Turks to support all of this. This is backwards. The way the United States has produced this strategy, as it does with many other strategies, is self-referencing and developing it by what our stakeholders want in Washington, and then trying to go sell it to our partners. That's the backwards way to develop a strategy. First, you consult with partners, especially the partner who controls the straits into the Black Sea, maybe in this case. And then you jointly form a strategy and then you execute. So until we get a little bit better at consulting with Turkey about things like that, then the potential for joint support to Romania and Bulgaria, and also continuing with Azerbaijan and trying to win back Georgia from its current sort of shattered position, those are all great potential things that have to be triggered by better US-Turkish coordination.
Yeah, thank you, and we'll get back to one of the points that you mentioned in the next round, but now let me just turn to Eser, who is the last but definitely not the least, as is the energy security in the region. And I think one of the questions that I mostly get when it comes to the role of Turkey is, what about the Russian gas and what about the energy hub? So tell us, what about the energy hub in Turkey?
Okay. Thank you very much for having me in this project as well. Evgenia, like Professor Serhat, I have skipped so many times the deadlines, but at the end of the day we finalized the project, and I hope that the results will bring more intellectual discussions to the community in Turkey and in Europe. Everybody started by speaking their old memories. I will do the same. And my approach is very similar to Reed's approach, because also I'm claiming that Turkey is following a delicate balancing act when it comes to the energy geopolitical relations, not for the Ukrainian and Russian war. When we go back to 1980s or early 1990s, we see a very clear track record of Turkey's balancing act in the energy geopolitics. In 2017, when I was the Secretary General of Platform, basically I was the lobbying of international and Turkish energy companies. And at that time we had very intense communication with US counterparties, especially the embassy in Ankara. And our US friends approached us with a project proposal. Why SRV can't? Why SRV shouldn't organize a LNG task force in cooperation with Turkish and American companies in order to understand, can we develop some LNG projects between our countries? I said, wow, that's a very good idea, because just in 2016, US government was discussing whether to allow LNG exports outside of the country or not. But in a very short period of time, especially when Brazil at the end of the 2016 imported first LNG cargo, all US governments and the companies understood that it's a good export opportunity for US economy. And Platform, my organization, was leading the private sector side in cooperation with Turkish Energy Ministry, as well as with the support of the Minister of Foreign Affairs, especially our consulate in Houston. We organized this trip. Just 1 week before the trip, this very famous visa ban of the Trump administration imposed. Luckily, we had all visas. We traveled to the United States, but actually we couldn't get the benefit of the meeting that expected before the organization. When I was there, most of the Department of State diplomats were asking me, sir, in 2015, you came to edge of a war with Russia after downing the Russian fighter in Syrian border, and you understood that LNG is a good choice to increase imports and diversification. But right now, you are also negotiating with Russia to construct Turk Stream pipeline. Isn't it contradictory? And I was saying that, isn't it contradictory to impose a visa ban to Turkish community when you want to develop the LNG infrastructure project with Turkish companies? So this is generally reflects the Turkey's energy geopolitical aspect as well. So I don't want to spend much time in the history, but in order to refresh our minds. In 1986, Turkey was first time signing the gas import agreement with Soviet Union. And that was the first international project in the natural gas sphere. But just 2 years later, in 1988, BOTAŞ at the same time was developing first LNG terminal project, which was called Marmara Reilisi, in order to balance any possible gas cut from Soviet Union with international alternatives from the markets. And if you go back to Turkish gas imports, you can easily see that after 1994 until 2002, Turkey's gas import balance was 30% in favor of LNG. When it comes to other international projects, especially 1992, 1993, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, Turkey was at the same time negotiating bringing hydrocarbon resources from Caucasian countries to the international markets. But at the same time, in 1997, Mesut Yılmaz was negotiating with Russia to construct a Blue Stream pipeline in order to balance the country's need. Again, in early 2002, Turkey was negotiating with Azerbaijan to Bakü-Tbilisi-Ceyhan pipeline as well as Bakü-Tbilisi-Erzurum gas pipeline. But on the other hand, Turkey was negotiating the gas import contracts at the end of 1990s with Iran. Again, when Turkey was negotiating Turk Stream project in 2017, but after 2015, Turkey had decided to heavily construct or expand LNG terminal offtake capacities inside the country. So if you look at the Turkey's relations with the countries around the region, Turkey has no clear chance to choose one to another. And this is the same when it comes to the Ukraine and Russia. That's why Turkey, for all of the crisis, followed a very delicate balance, especially when it comes to the energy sphere as well. So just looking from gas sector perspective, in 2020, you can see that the share of the Russian gas in Turkey is less than 40%, around 35%. The share of the LNG is increasing 27 to 28% with a perfect diversification. When it comes to 2023, since the Russian gas price is substantially cheaper than international markets, again you can see increase of the Russian gas share to 55%, then decrease the LNG. But at the same time, Turkey has been the enabler of the gas exports or imports from the EU perspective to the countries in most need. Especially Turkey has been the first country opening the LNG terminals for the Bulgaria when Russia declared the cut of gas supplies, and then basically with the LNG cargoes coming from the United States with regasification in Turkish terminals under test flows, not official, under test flows from Turkey to Bulgarian side, Bulgaria could sustain its gas need. Again, the similar agreements had been signed with other Balkan countries such as Moldova, such as Romania, and such as Hungary. There are several clear examples, but I don't want to keep that introduction speech long. My proposal is, my understanding is that Turkey wants to see a very clear balance in the relations, a delicate balance in the relations. As Rich said, that it could be catastrophic to see lose of Ukraine in this war from Turkish point of view, but also a catastrophic lose of Russia can bring so much uncertainty into the region as well. So this is directly reflecting to the energy relations too. My recommendation for the future cooperation, Turkey has a clear potential to facilitate, especially the negative effects of the energy crisis to Southeastern Europe and the Balkan countries. So definitely, with a Western point of view, Turkey should be opening more rooms to these countries for LNG imports. We need to increase the pipeline capacity between Turkey and Bulgaria. We need to reactivate again the interconnectors between Turkey and Greece. We should open more room to private companies in this interregional gas trade, because right now, currently, most of these contracts are signed bilaterally between state-owned companies, which is not bringing that much transparency, of course, to the trade. And we need to put not maybe a strategical, but a working energy cooperation deal between EU and Turkey in overall.
Thank you, and thank you for also bridging to the next round, which will be a round of very practical policy recommendations, because I don't know, maybe there are people who are still reading 50 pages of reports, but normally I know that that's the conclusion part and the main takeaways and policy recommendations that are most important. So I will ask you to briefly highlight some of the policy recommendations that you've made both for the Turkish side, for the Turkish government or NGOs or maybe even experts, academia, businesses, private companies, and for the European and US partners in this next round of our discussion before I open the floor for questions. And starting with USR, maybe just one follow-up question also about nuclear energy, because you spoke about gas, but there is also an issue of nuclear power plants, one already been built by Russia, another one planned for Sinop, and also potential cooperation with the US on that. So what's the situation there, and if there is anything else you would like to share as a policy recommendation, please?
Well, as you said that my proposal is delicate balance, and of course diversification and delicate balance in the energy supplies inside the country is also very critical. We consider as energy exports nuclear power plant as a certain replacement of base load when it comes to coal and natural gas as well. So from my point of view, being dependent to same supplier in two different kind of sources can bring some energy security concerns as well. Because Russia at the same time is supplier of natural gas, Turkey, in a substantial amount, but when it comes to the nuclear energy, still the Rosatom is going to be the supplier of the uranium and the raw material when it comes to nuclear energy generation. So from this point of view, even Turkey's installed capacity in electricity is rapidly growing, and right now the installed capacity is around 110 gigawatt. And if you look at the national energy plan of the Republic of Turkey, Ministry of Energy, in the in 2035, our installed capacity will be slightly less than 200 gigawatt or 200,000 megawatts. And the share of the nuclear energy, especially the Rosatom power plant, is going to be around 5% in the overall energy installed capacity. This might be considered as a very small amount. However, like other countries, especially when we are talking about carbon neutral world or coal phase out, definitely we need a transition fuel. That can be gas to a certain extent, but for more sustainable point of view, we will need nuclear energy, which is going to be coupled with renewable sources like solar and wind. So that's why my proposal is to cooperate with other project developers. It could be US companies, it could be European companies, it could be Japanese companies, but definitely in the nuclear energy sphere, Turkey should diversify its counterparties as well.
Great, thank you. Rich, can Turkey become a European defense pillar in NATO, and what would be the recommendation from your side?
Well, I mean, the good news is that Turkey has tremendous defense relations with parts of Europe. Right? There are a number of countries with whom it has, and by the way, with Ukraine we've already talked about, but with Poland, Albania, if we are considering UK still European.
I guess so.
Right, so certainly within the NATO context they are. But again, there are a number of countries in Europe that still are a little Turco-skeptic, if not Turcophobic. And this, frankly, is a problem in Washington as well. The truth is, the United States and the rest of and its European allies really haven't decided yet if they're comfortable with a militarily powerful Turkey. Turkey over the last 20 years has developed a very real power projection capability. Now we want that in the Black Sea, but we're not so sure we want it in Syria or in the Gulf or with the base in Qatar or in Africa and things like that. I'm one of those people who thinks, well, we've tried the United States, Canada, others by embargoing, by withholding, by ignoring, to limit the rise of Turkey's power projection capabilities, but it's far better to co-opt it through coordination. And I would recommend this to Europe, is that if you see the Turkish power projection capability as a threat, but you can't actually stop it because you won't go to war with the Turks and they no longer are dependent on your defense industrial products as much, then it's better to use honey than vinegar, as Mom used to say. In this case, you want to develop more cooperative projects like the Brits are trying to do, like the Ukrainians have done. And you want to engage in closer military-to-military coordination and consultations. This goes for the United States as well. The main recommendation for the United States is reconceive how we talk to the Turks and talk about the Turks. It has to be consultative. We do have some mechanisms for this, the high-level defense group and what's called the strategic mechanism, but I've been in those meetings, and to be honest with you, they're a little sterile, because essentially I have my talking points, you have your talking points. I have my grievances, you have your grievances. What's missing is the creative look at where we can actually have new products. And this is why I want to give some praise to the recently departed U.S. Ambassador to Turkey, Jeff Flake, who had a vision of how both the F-16 project could come about, but also he pushed very hard for this REPCON General Dynamics deal to take place. The institutions are not going to do this on their own. It needs to be leadership by senior, and whoever's elected president of the United States, and senior leaders in Turkey as well, and senior leaders in Europe have to take a personal interest in this and find those areas of overlap and collaboration. And then, finally, strengthening the littoral states, especially with regards to some of the newer technologies in air defense, naval defense, anti-ship missiles. Ukraine has proven, in some cases they've used some Turkish systems, but a lot of them are homemade systems as well, that you can push the Russian Navy off the coast if you have your own sufficient aerial denial assets. And Sir Howard, I don't want to get too much into the naval sphere here, but I'm just saying, both for the air denial of airspace and littoral space to the Russians can be done, and we need to put more money, and frankly, some of the Turkish technologies would be great as a NATO-funded project to help with that.
Great. Marina, the floor is yours, and also just incorporating some of the questions that I've got so far, also could you refer to the mediation potential of Turkey, because I think this is one of the questions when it comes to political dialogue, to diplomatic efforts, whether Turkey can play this role, and do you think this situation is now ready for that? Are the conditions ripe for that? And maybe how we can tap into that potential if there is an interest, but also any other recommendations.
Thank you very much, Evgenia. This is where the difficult part of the story starts, I think. Talking about the recommendations, how to engage and leverage Turkey's potential as a mediator. I mean, the biggest obstacle, as I see, is the divergent threat perception between Turkey and other allied nations. Turkey, something that the other colleagues already, and echoing what they said. The biggest, I mean, providing recommendations. I mean, we should assume that partners see eye to eye on many issues, on Russia-Ukraine war, for instance. And this is not the case with Turkey and some other NATO members, or the majority of them. So let me say that I clearly see the divergence here, how the Russia-Ukraine war is viewed by Ankara as a more regional, isolated conflict, which impacts Turkey in a way, but there is other dimensions like fight with terrorism or Syrian war, which is like a bigger priority, or let's say high priority here for Turkey. Or the way, you know, how, I mean, in fora like this, many esteemed Turkish colleagues clearly say that Ankara is not complacent about Russia's threat. But what I see at the same time, yes, Turkey, as I said, shared interest, Turkey contributes to NATO, etc. At the same time, Turkey facilitates or enables Russia. So, and I think this sort of divergent policy is a serious straitjacket to any shared approach to the Black Sea. So even if this is the case that Ankara is cognizant of Turkish threat, we don't see this openly expressed by Ankara. We don't see Turkey designating Russia as a threat, as NATO strategic concept does, as other allied nations in NATO do. So talking about Russia as a threat, yes, Russia as a threat, as adversary actually. So we don't see this language here. And I think it's to a big regret, and this is a serious limitation against to tap into the potential. We see also that sometimes this narrative, official narrative, echoes Russian narratives, describing the Russia's war against Ukraine as a result of great power competition, not as an unjust or unprovoked war that Russia started, but as a result of this great power struggle, US meddling into the Black Sea, encroaching or provoking Russia. And this is clearly not how Ukraine or other allied nations see, where this war is actually a defining feature of their daily existence. For Turkey, I have a feeling that it's not. And also how the public discourse in this country, according to the polls conducted by many colleagues, I've seen that assigns the sometimes equal responsibility to Ukraine and Russia for this war, you know, for this war happening at all. So this is a footnote about saying that I see divergence of threat perceptions, And of course, many recommendations could be, made if those threat perceptions are better aligned, then we could really have lots of, benefits here. And you've asked about the mediation and Turkey. It's also a shared interest, which I didn't have time to mention, to use Turkey's mediation potential here, because I think it was also mentioned, Turkey showed itself as a strong negotiating Black Sea grain deal from which Russia withdrew, and Turkey couldn't do much bringing back Russia to the table, because Moscow decided not to, or negotiating the prisoner exchanges. But again, I think that it's very good to have Ankara on board for the negotiations. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I think I would express also, the Ukrainian position, but also the international position. But when the conditions are ripe, right, for the negotiations, when Ukraine has a stronger hand negotiating with Russia, then Turkey could be an indispensable facilitator, platform for those negotiations. And unripe or sort of hasty, pushing Ukraine to negotiate when the conditions are not ripe would not do good. And just the last notes, I really see Turkey as being important leader in terms of, let's say, conduit of many NATO activities in the region. I think it's very important to see those minilateral initiatives like Black Sea mine clearance task force group in the region. Why not to think about expanding it? Because I know that Turkey objected for this task force being under the NATO auspices, or having NATO engineers or others on board, technicians on board. So why not to think that the conditions are quite ripe already, more than 2 years into the war, to actually think about this, because Ukraine is the most heavily mined nation in the world at the moment, to try to make Ukraine benefit from this, using it in this task force in the Ukrainian territorial waters as well. So Turkey, Romania, Bulgaria, in this format, of course, to boost it, to boost their capabilities, but to think about how to boost Ukrainian, Moldovan, and Georgia capabilities. So all these kind of multilateral projects. Of course, bilateral Turkey-Ukraine cooperation, why not to think, this is a recommendation both to Turkey but also to the West, why not to think how to multilateralize this format, try to bring other partners like United Kingdom, for instance, which would clearly have the interest. And of course, I would say that talking about the EU, if you talk West, EU as the West also, I agree with those Turkish colleagues and other colleagues who say that we need to actually resume the structured foreign and security dialogue between Turkey and the European Union. This will be very important to coordinate their strategies in the region. And very final note, to think how the idea of strategic autonomy of Turkey, this project is about Turkey's autonomous foreign policy in the Black Sea, how it aligns or not, I would argue, with the strategic dependence on Russia. So how to make sure that strategic autonomy means decreasing reliance on Russia, what to do with this as well. Yes, any mediation initiatives are perfect and they are welcome. I think sometimes there is sense in trying to coordinate them. Turkey is very welcome to come up with the unilateral initiatives, but sometimes I think the efforts are undermined by the lack of information on the side of, I don't know, Ukraine or other partners. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you. Serhat Hocam, one question from me and then your recommendations, and then we go for questions. We spoke a lot about maritime security, but most about missiles and drones and this hard security. But there are also one of the main concerns is the illegal activities of Russia in the Black Sea, including faking the documents, looted grain and coal from the occupied territories of Ukraine, going dark, switching off AIS, etc., etc. Maybe if you could incorporate it in your recommendations, is there anything to be done there to restore the safety of navigation, because it's basically about the safety of navigation in the Black Sea?
Well, unfortunately, Turkey doesn't have capabilities to rectify the discontinuities, irregularities Russia has been causing in the conduct of safe passage in terms of spoofing GPSs, etc. So we have to grant that. As for the stolen grain from Ukraine and their transportation from the Turkish Straits, again, from a legal perspective, there is nothing Turkey can do about it. I was working for a translation office back in 1991, and we were contracted to provide translation services for a Turkish a court in Istanbul, which issued a warrant for intercepting and boarding a Cyprus flag vessel, Cape Maleas, which was carrying illegal arms from Bulgarian port of Burgas to Iran, and it was chartered by Iranian Islamic Republic shipping lines. So Turkish Coast Guard stopped that vessel. You know, they went through, they carried out a thorough search. They put up an inventory, but the Turkish Court of Appeal returned or reversed the decision of the local court on the grounds that, according to Montreux Convention, freedom of navigation is an absolute right for merchant vessels unless the flag country is at war with Turkey. So it was a Cypriot flagship hired by Iranian regime, and therefore that ship and its cargo was released. And I was involved in the translation of the court documents, etc. Later, European Court of Human Rights, fined Turkey for interrupting freedom of navigation for merchant vessels through the Turkish Straits. So, with that case in mind, I mean, whether illegally obtained grain, war materials, whatever it is, their cargo, Turkey can do nothing based on the international law, based on the court decisions, national and international court decisions. So Turkey's hands are tied in that respect. As for my recommendations, I have a rather short list. There is obviously a mutual sense of feeling of frustration, both in Turkey and in the West. They are exasperated about dealing with each other. The United States and some European Union countries do not want to deal with Turkey. And I remember, in the early stages of the war in Ukraine, RAF, Royal Air Force, avoided Turkish airspace, to conduct maritime surveillance and combat air patrols of Romanian coasts, because they didn't want to deal with Turkey, even for overflight permissions. And this indeed is an indicator of the wariness on the part of Turkey's allies. But on the other hand, it is so easy to take shots at Turkey at the moment, and in the process, Turkey's contribution to Ukrainian defense is overlooked. They'd rather not mention it at all, or Turkey's involvement in the grain deal, for instance. I was in a room with a German diplomat who was surprised to hear that Turkey was, instrumental in making that deal. There was a great deal of denial, so they don't want to hear about Turkey. And in the case of artillery rounds, 155, how much more Germans paid per MKE-produced artillery rounds, extra, $700 service charge by Czech government, Czech Republic government. They bought the rounds from Turkey. They put a service charge on them, and they sold them to the German government.
That's a good business move.
That's for the Czechs, yes, but for the Germans, no. I mean, they didn't get a bigger bang for their money. Yeah. They had to settle for far less. So such irrationalities, increasing the opportunity costs of not dealing with Turkey. Maybe it's about time to think about, avoiding Turkey. Maybe, this policy has reached its limits. Turkey, let me conclude. Turkey has a stake in Ukraine's survival. Otherwise, there would be no logical explanation for Turkey's, willingness to build 4 corvettes for the Ukrainian Navy. The presumption is that Ukraine would survive this war and Ukraine would remain a Black Sea country. So that is a strong indication of Turkey's commitment to Ukraine's survival. But as Ambassador said, I mean, we cannot afford an absolute defeat of Russia either. Then the Montreux Convention will be questioned, and Turkey will be the odd man out, defending as the sole defender of Montreux Convention. The signatories, the lineup of signatories is not promising in that regard. Think of a situation where you have to deal with a defeated Russia and the other signatories of the Montreux Convention, maybe Serbia. The others probably will be for revising the Montreux Convention. That's all I would like to say.
Thank you. And playing a devil's advocate, I would probably question what a defeated Russia would look like, especially after the Kursk operation, where the Russian red lines, whether they're still there or not. But I'm not asking any questions anymore. I'm open the floor to your questions and comments. I think I will collect several of them so that you can pick and choose. And then please introduce yourself, make your comment, statement, question. And we have around 10, 15 minutes for that. And while we're waiting, yes, please. Yeah.
Thank you. My name is Bahadır Kalayaz. I'm former Secretary General of TÜSİAD and actually international advisor in several institutions. Well, I had several questions, but once a speaker took over, she or he replied, so it was a perfect complementarity. Yet, still a question, maybe with a comment, because in the executive summary, which I read already, not the report itself yet, there is lots of there is almost a direct recommendation to put this topic into the West in general, but particularly in Europe's global outlook somewhere, so that relations of the European Union and of the United States with Turkey takes better into account all these realities, facts, and the perspectives that you have been highlighting. And now that the European Union released its report, Draghi released its report on the European Union's global competitiveness, and trying to make sure that Europe is not shrinking in an expanding global order, I see lots of slight readjustments on what you have said, also in relation and from the angle of Europe's own global competitiveness issues, not only in the industry, but on the security of this industrial development and the technological improvements and all the geostrategy and geoeconomics that are required to be injected into the European geostrategic thinking itself. So it's a comment which includes lots of hidden questions probably. Thank you.
Thank you. There was one of the questions coming online, both to Ambassador Ozturk, if you prefer to answer, and to Serhat Hoca about the Montreux Convention. A question from Stephen Shapiro, who's also a senior fellow of the Atlantic Council, asking about the Article 19 of the Montreux Convention, and it's a long one, so I'll just briefly refer to it, saying that for the countries which are not belligerent, so which are not the parties to this war, the warships should enjoy complete freedom of transit and navigation through the straits. However, this is not the situation that we are currently seeing now. So maybe just add into this pool of questions whether this is Article 19 or not. And maybe another question from myself as well, with the closure of the straits, how long will it take to open it for, with due respect to the Montreux Convention, after the war? Like what this after the war would look like? Is it a ceasefire? Is it a sustainable peace? So how do you see the future of the Montreux Convention and the Straits in this regard? And if there are any other questions, yes, please, Ambassador.
I'm Lazar Comanescu, the Secretary General of the Black Sea Economic Cooperation Organization. I would like to, pick up from two aspects which were mentioned here by the panelists. One was by Rich, when he underlined the fact, and I fully subscribe to what he said, that sometimes it's difficult how to deal, to find a way how to deal the best with a big country which may avail also of nuclear. And so means. And the second aspect was the one mentioned by Marina about the possibility, the prospects for seeking a solution when the conditions are ripe. My question is, first, as regards the how to deal with a big country. Deterrence and containment are, of course, essential. On the other hand, would it deserve to look into other paths, potential paths, how to deal? And now that I link it with the other aspect, the conditions are ripe. Because when you have two opposite actors, to say, yeah, how to come up with the situation where each side, or there may be a kind of even preliminary agreement about when these ripe conditions will be there. How to define and how to find the moment when it is. And that brings me to my third question or remark, which is linked to the two. Following from a neutral point of view, of course, I have to be a neutral given my position. But it is my personal perception that when it comes to find ways ahead in these aspects, I would say that from the West, I mean the alliance, or EU as a whole, because there are two actors, it seems to me that indeed how Turkey has been acting all throughout this period could deserve as a kind of a source of inspiration how to deal with the two sides who are in conflict. I am not entering in now into who's guilty. Definitely, we know that we have to deal with. I mean, we witness an invasion, but the problem is how to deal and to prepare the ground for these ripe conditions, which we mentioned here. And there, really, I think that what Turkey has been doing so far could be kind of a source of inspiration.
Thank you, Secretary General. And if we don't have any other questions, I would ask you to be very brief, also wrapping up in your final remarks and answering the questions in maybe 2 minutes each. Starting from Rich, you?
Okay.
You want to start?
Well, I think, Secretary General, that the counterpart of the complement to deterrence and containment has to be diplomacy, diplomacy, diplomacy. Obviously, the Turks, in my view, are trying to do this as well. They're continuing diplomatic outreach even as they provide the material support and operational support in some cases to Ukrainian forces. The United States says it's doing this. The Biden administration has obviously sent the director of the Central Intelligence and others to talk with the Russians. So we are talking with the Russians to some extent on some very specific issues. I'm in favor of that. I think actually the problem in our case is that we have not successfully deterred. I think that we've misplayed the escalation dynamics. And again, I may not have mentioned it, but you know, in the Cold War, and I was commissioned when there still was a Cold War, we were not afraid to talk about retaliation with nuclear weapons if the Russians start talking about nuclear escalation. So you have to, instead of constantly signaling to the Russians, well, if you talk about nuclear weapons or escalation, here's where we won't go. You know, we say exactly how far we won't go. We say what the top of our escalation is. It's a huge mistake. I think we've forgotten. We used to have muscle memory during the Cold War about how to deter and how to get that right escalation and de-escalation balance. And I think we need to re-examine how we're doing that, but then talk to them the whole time. And I think the diplomatic outreach in the West has been weak because we've essentially said, Putin, you don't deserve for us to talk to you. We're going to sanction you diplomatically. We're going to isolate you Well, they're not really isolated. The Chinese talk to him, the Iranians talk to him, the Indians talk to him, the Turks talk to him. So in reality, we've not successfully isolated. What we've done is we've cut off the ability to do that other complement while we're also deterring. And just in terms of any final wrap-up comments, look, I remain upbeat about the future of the Black Sea and about the future of Ukraine, which of course is the big issue in the Black Sea now. Because ultimately the collective potential of all the people on the right side of this is still higher than that of the Russians, who are the revisionist power. Now, we've misplayed some things, certainly, but I don't think there's anything here that if we, within NATO and its set of extended allies, with a little bit more energy, and this, by the way, extends even, whatever the results of the election are in November, I don't think any U.S. president wants to see Ukraine's independence put to an end or to see Ukraine lose this war. I think that's an overstated concern, but we will get tired of it if we don't see some success, and for that we need to work closer with Turkey, and we need to ramp up our coordination mechanisms at the strategic level.
And one more follow-up question, very timely, coming from Jan Anthony online, asking whether doing something together, working together to address a looming crisis with Iran is another area where Turkey and the US could cooperate, and if this is an area where there is any scope for constructive engagement Washington, Ankara can have, or are the sensitivities too great for that?
For me?
Yeah, for you. It says question for Richard, and sorry, I cannot address it to anyone else here on the panel.
So this is a hard one for me because I'm an Iran hawk. I mean, I actually take people seriously when they say death to America, right? So what I would like to see, but what I'm not going to get is I think, for Turkey to take more of a side. Because, look, Iran is a neighbor for Turkey. And I understand Turkey is, they sometimes say in the States that where you stand depends on where you sit. And Turkey sits right next to Iran. It can't afford to have chaos in Iran either. It can't, just like it can't afford to have chaos in Russia. So Turkey needs to find a way in Syria and in Iraq and in other regional places where Iran is absolutely trying to damage Turkish interests, to impose costs and to deter, while still doing business and diplomacy with the Iranians. So it's a little different for the United States. Our view is different. It's that the regime itself is the biggest obstacle to peace in the Middle East. So I think the best thing we can do there is consult and to find better local coordination on issues specific to Syria and Iraq. But I think the gap in the perceptions and the national interests on those on the Iran file is simply too wide for us to actually have a common position on.
Great. Marina, very briefly, your points.
Couple of points. Start with the Montreux Convention. I think that, I mean, my personal point of view, but I think this is a common stance on the issue, how Montreux Convention and Turkey use closing the straits for the Russian ships, how this contributed to Ukrainian survival and war efforts, so creating the equilibrium in the Black Sea to Ukraine's advantage. What needs to be done, I would add from myself, is that while Turkey, we know Turkey's position that the straits will remain closed till the end of the war, very rarely there is a definite point when we say, okay, this war is over. And very likely, as a Ukraine expert myself, I also say that this is very likely that this war will not have this, you know, final peace treaty or some moment. So what I say, this can be a prolonged war. And does it mean that there will be no presence of NATO ships apart from the littoral states in the Black Sea? Is this what we want? Is this what Turkey, Romania, or Bulgaria itself, or Ukraine, or would like to see in the Black Sea being, in fact, de facto closed for the presence of the NATO ships, or Ukraine not being able to actually receive the naval vessels donated or bought by Ukraine through the straits because Turkey is not letting them to pass, as we had this case with the UK minesweepers that UK donated to the Ukraine. So I think the conversation needs to start already now. How do we manage this equilibrium, not to disturb it, but still we continue to help Ukraine actually to win this war. Another thing, Secretary General Kumanescu's question about when the diplomacy is not bringing you the most preferred variant of solution, isn't it better to stick with the second best option? I would say that security-wise, again, speaking about our aim to have security, sustainable peace in the region, second, there are no second best options to Ukraine's complete victory over Russia. Colleagues opined here that it's good for Turkey if Russia is not completely defeated. I would say my opinion is also widely shared, I believe, is that there is no better thing that could happen to Russia than to be defeated in this war. A prominent Ukraine historian, Timothy Snyder, just recently talked about this in this way, saying how important for the imperial power is to be defeated and actually to try later to be reborn in a different. So there could be security with Russia, but with a different Russia. This is my opinion. So there is no second best option to Ukraine's victory, and we need to do with this. That's why I agree completely. What the West didn't do sufficiently, this incrementalism of weaponry supplies to Ukraine, military assistance to Ukraine, with this, drip-dropping approaches of what we give, how we restrict Ukrainians, how they can use it, the long range, short range, etc. So this didn't help at all because it undermined the credibility, drawing or advertising our own red lines. So I think that yes, we need to, talking about the Turkey in the Black Sea, I mean, we inevitably talk about Ukraine winning as a prerequisite for Turkey's better and stronger positions in the Black Sea. There is an interlinkage.
I get it. Would you agree?
No, I mean, partially. I mean, well, Rich, you're a Cold War warrior from what you talked about, I gather. Is Black Sea, what kind of a naval theater of operation is the Black Sea? The case in point, the fate of Russian flagship cruiser Moscow. You cannot operate huge surface vessels in times of war in the Black Sea. It has been a submarine theater of operations. You need submarines, not an aircraft carrier group in the Black Sea. It will be a sitting duck. And those naval ships, donated or ordered by Ukraine, the moment they move the sail out of the Turkish Straits and they head into the international waters, the Russian backfire bombers will be attacking them. And they stand very little chance, if any, survival. I mean, so it is, unless the intent is to make a demonstration, fine, but it will be a very costly exercise. And as for the condition is that Ukraine continues to decimate Russian Black Sea Fleet's submarine force. Ukraine, with the help of its ally, is able to neutralize the A2AD capabilities of Russia around the Black Sea, then they are most welcome. Again, this escalation domination. Will NATO be willing and able to escalate it to a full-fledged war, including the nuclear option with Russia? These are high-level political decisions. It's not about only legality or technical issue, etc., but it's about higher strategic decisions. If such decisions are taken, then it will be a different situation. Moreover, the Article 19 question, the ambassador will address that question. I'm far more competently than I am, but let's assume that the non-littorals, warships, are allowed into the Black Sea, right? The Brits, sending their mine countermeasures vessels and transfer them to Ukraine. What about China? What if China sends major warships and place them at the disposal of Russia? Would you like to see that happen? China is building warships faster than any other nation on the earth. And they can dispense with a few major surface vessels far more comfortably than any NATO member, including the United States. So there are practicalities, and the odds are not in favor of Ukraine or NATO or Turkey in that matter. But again, the air domain is a different story. That is, we were led to believe that Russia built a very solid A2AD bubble, in Crimea. Well, that was not impenetrable. Probably the best thing will be to create a NATO, A2AD bubble, and the idea was brought up in a previous conference, to provide protection for NATO assets, both naval and air and land assets in and around the Black Sea. Then, once we have that advantage, we can talk about those issues. It's too early. We don't have the assets, the capabilities in place yet.
But because our report is a forward-looking report, which I invite you to read here on our website, that is exactly the thing we want to think out of the box as experts, just throwing in some ideas. Sir, we desperately need energy
May I
at
add
the
a few
end of...
things? The EU dimension. None of us covered that, right? Just a few sentences. I'm going to quote directly from my report. I thank Ambassador Alper Coşkun, yes, for drawing my attention to that. EU adopted a decision to come up with a Black Sea strategy back in June. It reads, the European Council reaffirms the importance of security and stability in the Black Sea and invites the Commission and the High Representative to prepare a joint communication on building an EU strategic approach to Black Sea. We all know that EU has policies, but those policies have not created any substantial impact on the ground. And Joseph Borrell admitted that in another part of the world, growing Turkish and Russian influence has derailed the EU's Mediterranean order. In an even larger geographical space. Unfortunately, I mean, the EU should start rethinking its strategies, especially its policy of excluding or avoiding Turkey, so that it can have a policy in the Black Sea with an impact on the ground. Otherwise, I mean, there is no reason to expect that the same thing will not happen in the Black Sea. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you. No, that was a great contribution. Sir, your brief remarks to wrap up.
Maybe in 1 minute. When it comes to energy projects, basically, these are long-term issues. So that's why the key thing is to optimize the utilization of the current infrastructure as much as possible. So that's why basically I'm focusing on that part to gas and renewable electricity side. The first thing that in Turkey we have LNG capacity with up to 150 MCM per day gasification capacity. When it comes to the annual load, Turkey is utilizing this capacity with 35 to 40% rate. So that's why the Turkish LNG terminals are very much available for the Southeastern European countries. Let's use it. The second one, the Turkish-Bulgarian Trans-Balkan pipeline can work with reverse flow up to 45 MCM per day. Some extra refurbishment and investments at the Bulgarian side is needed. Let's focus on this. This is going to be an easy side too. The option 3, the Turkey-Greece interconnector is not working right now. The working capacity was 0.75 BCM per year. However, it can be easily upgraded to 3-4 BCM. Let's work on it. Option for the Turkey's solar power plant capacities is more than 5 to 6 gigawatts in terms of panel production. Let's focus on it. We can easily increase the exports to European countries. Another issue that the Turkey's storage capacity will reach to 10 BCM per year very soon. So let's work on it. How to upgrade potential. Last but not least, the capacity upgrade of the TANAP and TAP is rather relative than constructing new pipeline. Let's focus on it.
Thank you very much, and thank you for keeping your time short. And Ambassador Ozturk, you wanted to make some final remarks, please.
Thank you very much. Very briefly indeed. What I would like to just add to what Rich said about the exclusion of Turkey from 5 billion euro project for joint ammunition procurement, we were also excluded from 50 billion euro Ukraine peace facility also means, which is about reconstructing Ukraine. In reality, as you know, it will be Romanian, Turkish, and maybe some other European companies and people, engineers will be reconstructing Ukraine on the ground. But anyway, this was one thing. So the EU is also dreaming about having a Black Sea strategy containing bypassing Turkey, including by laying cables. I just would like to recall the infamous EastMed project, which became history. We cannot be excluded from any project around Turkey's regions. I think a new approach should start with also understanding and respecting Turkey's vital interests in its sea areas, land borders, and its immediate region. And winning a war is not really about winning battles. We have seen it also in Afghanistan. Remember the motto, it was winning hearts and minds. The war is not only battles, even if it's brutal. Even the militaries are required, but ultimately, the wars will be won by hearts and minds. That can only be achieved with a whole government, whole society approach, which definitely will include diplomacy at all times. Even with Taliban, we were talking and fighting at the same time. So this was also another thing. With regard to the question of my friend Mr. Shapiro, if he listens to me now, so he asked this question previously on different fora. He read the Montreux Convention line by line, word by word, but he doesn't know the acquis of the implementation of Montreux Convention for 88 years. But we know. So therefore, Professor, also I'm going to tell you that no one in this world can modify Montreux Convention without the consent of Turkey. Because if the states parties can ask for a conference to discuss Montreux Convention, there will have to be a consensus. That consensus can only be achieved with the consent of Turkey. And the final thing I would like to say is that Turkey is having a full recognition of the situation in the Black Sea, recognized maritime picture, recognized air picture. Almost 70% is coming from Turkey. And we are the only ally who can operate subsurface, surface, air, vessels, equipment at all times, day and night, every day. This is a very precious also asset and opportunity no other ally can even think of. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador. And before I thank to our contributors and to you for coming and taking time to listen to us, there is another person in this room to whom we owe also this project. It was made possible with your contributions, with the funding by the SWP and the Stiftung Mercator and German Federal Foreign Office. So please, Dr. Asli Hursoy, I would like to ask you for closing remarks and also to thank you on behalf of the Atlantic Council and our team for making this project possible.
Actually, I know everyone is tired, but I just want to thank you all, Atlantic Council Turkey and Yevgenia, for this wonderful project. I'm very happy as the head of the Center for Applied Turkish Studies that we financed this project and made possible, and thanks to all the authors. Only one final remark. Actually, I agreed with Serhat Hoca before we started talk that Europe is not acting as a political actor, but now I have to, of course, as a representative of a German institute, have to play the devil's advocate, of course. And I think it will be great to see you, maybe not all of you, but see you in Brussels. And then let's see how the Europe bashing is goes there, how they react to that. Because as Marina said, threat perceptions are different, but important in doing politics and developing policies. We as CATS, we are of course trying to put our findings on the table. Our CATS network friends and partners are doing this. We try to lay the ground for a discussion and debate, and we hope that European decision makers will look at that and you can discuss with them about it. So it was a great experience working together with you. I'm very happy to see the final report is being published soon. So we will also, of course, relaunch it on our website. And have a nice Friday evening in Istanbul.
Thank you very much. And let's say this is not the end of this project. This is just a report being published, but hopefully this is a beginning of future collaborations and cooperations. With this, I want to thank to wonderful contributors who made a great job writing their chapters, talking to each other, seeing how it fits best, and actually spent 1 year of your life working on this report, which is important. I want to thank you for coming today, and of course I want to thank the Atlantic Council in Turkey and Turkish program team, to Senior Director Defne, thank you very much for supporting us in this, and to a great team, to Grady Wilson, to Alpozan, to Zeynep Agili, who worked side by side together with me, and actually their contributions were just invaluable, and thank you for coming. We look forward to meeting you in different Atlantic Council events. Thank you.
Geçmiş olsun.
Thank you.